Hi everyone, my name is Kishor, and I want to talk to you today about downward facing dog and upward facing dog. So these are two poses that are really important in a yoga asana practice, right? They're practiced all the time, and they're really foundational and fundamental. So we want to understand them from a place of sustainability and how we can practice these poses for years and years to come, right? So that we move away from the common pains or injuries that sometimes come along with these poses when they're practiced in unsustainable ways. And that might be wrist pain, that might be shoulder pain, that might be lower back pain or upper back pain. It might be overstretching the hamstrings and finding some pain there as well. So we're really going to break down these two poses in a way where we understand the structure, and from there we have a sense of strength and stability. So we're gonna need two blocks for this really short practice. I have one here and I'm sitting on the other, and we're gonna meet on all fours. So in all fours, we have a very personal way of coming into things, and so it's really important to actually measure, because I might come into all fours and I might think this is right, I might come into all fours and I might think this is right. So our feelings sometimes can be a little bit misguided, and what's really nice to do is to have a measure. Right? So what I'm going to do is just use this block to help me measure my thigh, right? So I know that I'm at a 90-degree angle, because if I'm not at a 90-degree angle, and let's say I'm over here, the block falls over, right? So it's a really nice thing to just measure as such. And then I'm also going to measure my forearm, right? My arms. And just like that. So it creates a really nice frame of reference, because when we have a frame of reference, then we're able to really have more strength and stability. Okay, so I'm going to put these blocks back. And then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to measure the hands, right? So when I measure the hands, it's really, really simple. My heels stayed glued to the mat, but I'm going to turn my hands in towards each other so that the fingertips touch. So if you see that the fingertips don't touch, then you just want to walk them a little bit closer to each other so that they're touching, right? And then I bring them back to where they were. So this is a really nice measured out all fours pose. And one last thing here is that the tops of my feet, when I'm doing cat-cows and stuff like that, or when I'm in this pose, it's really easy for them to get floppy. So I really want to ground the tops of my feet into the earth, okay? So here I am, really nice, strong, and stable. And then from here, I'm going to focus a little bit on the hands, right? Because some of us have a tendency to hyperextend our elbows, and when the elbows get hyperextended, look at what's happening to my shoulders. They're like crowding my neck, right? And I don't have really space for my clavicle. So what I'm going to do is have a little tiny bend in my elbow and feel like I'm opening my clavicle as I reach my chest slightly forward, right? So notice that the bend in the elbow, it's not really like bending it back. It's actually bringing the elbow into a straight line, right? And just breathe here. So a common pain that's sometimes reported in downward facing dog is the heel of the hand. So I'm gonna offer a little map here of our hands so that we can move out of that pain of our the wrist, right? The base of the wrist. And so what we're going to do here is using your muscles, right? Using your physicality, you're going to find these 3 points, right? Because the tendency sometimes is that I flatten out my hand completely on the ground, and that's really not what we want to do. We want to, you see people sometimes kind of splaying their fingers and splaying their hands out. So actually have your fingers a little bit closer to each other. And from here, what you're going to do is find with your muscles, right? Don't lose those elbows, don't lose the wide clavicle. Find with the muscles the base of your hands, right? The base of your wrists, the very center. Okay, and feel the weight there. Then you're going to travel up to the pointer finger of both hands and feel the weight there. And then you're going to keep those 2 points and travel around the back of the hand to the outer edge of the hand, right? Like underneath the pinky, right? And see if that created like a little lift in the center of your hand. It should have created like this little lift. So if you lost it, again, base of the hand, pointer finger, outer edge, okay? So let's keep on moving here into the front of our hand, right? Into the knuckles of our hand. So we're just gonna do this one at a time, really nice and slow. I'm slowly gonna lift the heel of my left hand and shift my weight forward into the knuckles and the fingers, and then I'll drop it. And I'll slowly lift the right heel of the hand, and I'll drop it. And we'll just do that maybe one more time each side. Lift and drop. And lift and drop, right? So good. So the last thing that we'll do here is I'm gonna keep my wrists glued to the mat, the base of my wrist, and I'm just gonna turn my hands back, right? Really opening here, not only through the wrists, but through the neck, the clavicle, and the shoulders. So again, same thing goes here. If you have a tendency to hyperextend like I do, then really what you're seeing in the arm is that it's bowing forward. So again, I wanna bend my elbows, create length and width in my clavicle and in my chest, right? My clavicle going out to the right and out to the left, my chest going forward, my tail reaching back. And I'm just gonna really feel like I can pull my hands apart here. Breathe a lot. Yeah, it should be quite the sensation in your arms right now, I know. Okay, so from there, I'm gonna bring my hands back to normal. And I'll just pause here, okay? So now my wrists are nice and open, and let's talk about downward facing dog. Let's go into it, folks. So I'm gonna step back into plank for just a moment, because plank is really the measure of a dog. So it's really nice to start here in plank, because if I go to downward facing dog from hands and knees, the tendency is that the dog will be short, like this, right? This is a very short dog. So rather, I'm gonna step my feet back into plank, and from plank, I bend my knees and I lift my butt way up into the air. Now, I already know what you're thinking. Why did I say bend your knees, right? Because your knees should still be bent here. Now, the tendency with downward facing dog, and you can stop and take a look, or you can just hear me say this. The tendency is that everyone wants to squeeze their heels down to the mat as much as they can and straighten out their legs, and then you'll see people kind of drop their head, and this is what we see a lot of the time. And this is really not so great, right? Because what it's doing is that it's taking out the natural curve of our spine. So if we look at like a cow pose, right? Do you see the natural curve of my spine? My tail is going up, then my lower spine curves in, right? Like a wave. Then my thoracic goes up, right? My upper back. Then my cervical, my neck goes in like a wave, and then my head goes forward. So this wave is actually what we want to keep in the downward facing dog. So when I lock my knees in any pose, I lose the connection between my body and my lower back and my sacrum, and it creates like a hump, right? So we don't want a hump in downward facing dog. We want a very nice, beautiful wave that helps the chest come forward. So let's find it again. I'm stepping back into plank, I'm bending my knees, and I'm lifting my butt way up into the air. So really here, what I want to do is I want to bend my knees, right? And bending your knees doesn't mean like lifting your heels all the way up like this. Keep your heels down, but just bend your knees. And I want you to think that your butt is lifting up really high into the air. Keep your ears in line with your shoulders, so you're neither cranking the neck forward, nor are you dropping the head down. Try to find that little hand map that we did, right? Heel of the hand, pointer finger, outer edge of the hand, plug the hands in. See if you can rotate the armpits in towards your heart to create space through your shoulder and your clavicle, right? And you're gonna keep on thinking, bending my knees and lifting my butt, bending my knees and lifting my butt, and thinking chest forward, right? So it's really creating this beautiful crescendo in the back. So good, everyone. Beautiful. Yeah, so here we have our downward facing dog, right? Moving out of the lower back by finding that wave, moving out of the base of the wrists by finding that hand map, okay? So nice. So let's move on to upward facing dog, right? And we'll move through these two poses a few times. So the thing with upward facing dog that we see a lot of people do, a lot of students do this, I'm always correcting my students, is that in a vinyasa, for example, you'll see people lower down into chaturanga or all the way down to the ground. They flip their feet and they do this, right? So this is not a sustainable upward facing dog because I'm dropping all of the weight into my lower back, my shoulders are closed into my neck. I'm not really feeling like an open window, you know? It doesn't feel like there's any air in me. Actually, everything feels very compressed and fallen and sunken down. And then the thing is that even when I do chaturanga or all the way, I flip my toes and I do this, my hips are still falling too close to the ground. So actually, what I want to do here is I want to keep my legs really strong and really engaged, right? I want my legs to have a lot of communication with this pose. I want to use my lower body, so that's where the beginning of the pose starts, right? From my legs. So what we're going to do for this upward facing dog is we're going to take these blocks and we're going to put them on the middle setting next to each other as such, okay? And we're going to start in downward facing dog. And remember, downward facing dog, I'm measuring out through plank, and I'm coming into the dog. So you'll notice that the blocks kind of catch your forehead here, right? And what the blocks are going to do is that they're giving us a little bit of scaffolding. So when I go forward into up dog, it's giving me accountability to keep my legs involved. So I'm coming through plank pose, right? And then from here, instead of thinking dropping the hips, and we're going to keep our toes tucked for this, instead of thinking dropping the hips, think my elbows are bent, my clavicle is widening, my hips are reaching forward, and now you'll see like this nice C shape in my back, right? So I'm not crunching at my lower back, I'm actually finding a lot of length here, right? And then the gaze will look up slightly without cranking the neck, right? Sometimes we see a lot of people in upward facing dog cranking the neck. And while you're holding this pose, don't let the legs fall slack. You might feel that you want to just release your weight into the blocks. No, keep those legs really strong, keep the hips moving forward. And then actually from here, we can bend the knees, lift the butt way up into the air, and go right back to downward facing dog. So I'm really in my hip joint here. And when I'm moving through joint space, it becomes less tiresome, it becomes less strenuous, and it becomes actually more smooth. So you can try it a couple of times, coming forward, staying in the balls of your feet, slightly bending the elbows, widening the clavicle, reaching the hips forward, strengthening through the legs, and finding up dog. And then come back to down dog. And you can do it one more time, right? Inhaling forward, get those hips forward for upward facing dog. And come back to downward facing dog. So nice, everyone. We'll do it one last time. We're coming forward, and we're in up dog, and we're holding. So I just want you to feel how much more open this up dog feels, right? There's so much space between my neck and my shoulders. My clavicle is widening. I should feel no pain in my lower back, and my legs are really strong and stable. Okay, let's come back to downward facing dog. You can drop your knees, and you can be in a child's pose or any resting pose just to relax through the wrists. We did a lot. Thank you everyone so much for your time. I hope you learned something about upward facing dog and downward facing dog. So I better not see any slacking, falling to the ground legs. In up dog, keep them strong and moving those hips forward. And in downward facing dog, I better not see you locking out those knees and dropping the head. Keep your knees bent. Keep that little wave in your spine so the chest can move forward. Thank you so much everyone. Namaste.